Well, I would say good morning, but I guess I could say good afternoon, good night, accelerated. It is 9:02 p.m., April 26th. It is Sunday night. I am making these notes for what you're going to need on Tuesday. So now we're going a little bit further in our concepts. So we've been looking at function notation, and you have a quiz on Monday on Go Formative, adding components of function notation. But the assignment that was due Friday night, you were doing a lot of the same things. Actually, the same exact thing you're doing for the quiz. Where now you're taking everything we've done so far with function notation, plugging in for x, having to solve for x, having to solve for y. So all those different aspects we put together on the assignment on Friday, which sets up for the quiz on Monday. And now this is your assignment on Tuesday. We're now looking at inequality and interval notation. Now, there is a document that is on the website that I would suggest you try to print out the best way possible. It's about 6 pages, not 6 pages of all information you have to do. Most of it is just the stuff that you want to know. And you know how I do. I try to give you information you can refer back to. That's pretty much what this is. So I'm going to go over a series of a couple of different problems. There'll be about maybe, I think I'm going to do 2 or 3 different videos because I realize when they're over 9, 10 minutes, it takes forever to upload. So I'm gonna probably try to keep them short and just do a couple different problems on each video that I'm going to complete. So the first one here is looking at right over here, says page 2. Now page 1, you wanted to look through it, kind of pay attention to it, highlighted a couple of things that may have made some sense to you. And at the bottom of page 1, it says, remember, the pointing side of the inequality symbol points to whatever value is smaller. That's a very elementary way of trying to remember what it is. But I know people every year just kind of struggle with wherever the inequality is facing, what exactly does that mean? Now, if you have an inequality that's set up just like this, and I ask you, what does that mean? You shouldn't be able to tell me a value. You don't know if this is less than or greater than. So what I urge you to do is to pay attention to wherever the variable is located, right? So if I have a W here, and let's say I put a 6 here, this says W is less than 6. So I'm looking for, and usually the variable means just pretty much all numbers, right? So all numbers you're looking for in this scenario have to be less than 6. But now let's just say I keep the same exact value. Now I place it over here. Now all my values have to be greater than 6. So all I did was just switch my variable around, and now that inequality means 2 different things. So I need all of you to be careful that if you just, or any other class you get into, if a teacher tries to stump you and say, oh, okay, what does this mean right here? Your response is nothing right now. We need to have a variable to, and wherever that variable is located, it will help us dictate if that's a greater than or if that's a less than type problem. So I wanted to just kind of give you that just as a forewarning that you have to make sure you know where the variable is to understand what your inequality statement's trying to say. So, and actually now I'm getting into saying, so right over here where it says, right? So you just have a couple of small examples on page 2. Page 2, you only have 2 other examples after, because the one I'm giving you is the exact one that's going to be on your page. So it says that Z, I'm going to just do says down here. So I'm going to just write it down here. Oh, I should have took the thing off because now I'll be very, I'm going to write extra sloppy now. So says. So this says here, Z is greater than or equal to 14. And that's what this, and that's just what it says, right? When you read the inequality, it says that Z is greater than or equal to 14. But what this actually means, right? So what it means is that if you're now trying to collect data, there's certain information you actually want. So what this means is that you are looking for all values. Remember, I told you the variable pretty much means all values are all numbers. All values greater than 14 and include 14. And if that include piece you're kind of confused as to where that came from, then on page 1, right in the middle, there's a box that says inequality notation. And it kind of reads off the 4 different symbols you could have. If it's less than equal to, greater than, or greater than equal to, what those mean. So I suggest you go right back to the first page. Right in the middle of the first page, it says inequality notation. Read that closely. So since we have this little sign right here, I'll write it. You know what? That's too small to write. So I'm gonna put it. I'll erase these. These aren't imperative anymore. So this little symbol, now that I have my greater than, and then this means equal to. So this symbol right here means that I also want to use that value that's actually there. So I want to use all values that are greater than 14, but I also want to include 14 in whatever data I'm trying to gather. I also want 14 to be included. And this is going to come up in a couple of different ways. It's going to be very important as we start trying to analyze the 3 phases of rocket flight, which, yes, I know we aren't flying rockets, but when I make something tangible like this where you can actually see on this parabola the 3 different phases, you have to be able to use equal to, greater than, less than, but understand exactly what those mean. So this equal to is going to be pretty important moving forward. So that's page 2. So the first example is the first one you have on page 2. Then you're going to have 2 other examples on page 2. Now, right at the bottom of page 2, you have a box that says interval notation. Now, another way to indicate an interval, oh, that's what it is. Okay. In interval notation, you just write down the beginning and ending numbers of the interval and use the following notation. So on the previous page, page 1, you have those 4 different examples that you can have if something's going to be less than equal to, greater than, or greater than equal to. So now here you only are going to need 2 sets of symbols now that we're going to use. So now if we have a square bracket, it means that we want to include the data set. So this square bracket is this, it means the same as being able to have that equal to symbol there when you have that square bracket. It means you want to include that in value in your data set. A round bracket means that you do not. So a round bracket is just as if you had a regular less than or a regular greater than symbol. So if you just had either this one, I don't have a variable, so we'll know what exactly it represents, but if you had either one of these here, those in themselves just means that you're not going to include the data because you don't have the equal to sign underneath it, or the equal to symbol. So now let's look at this one. Let's go ahead and let's do this. So examples to complete. So the first one here on page 3, we are looking at, we have 2 closed brackets, right? But if we go back over here to this example on the right, they give us this one right down here. Let's look at this one first before we try to complete one on our own. So we have this round bracket, which means not equal to or not included. And then on the end, we have the square bracket, which means include. So it says you want your information from 5 to 19. Those are your endpoints. Do not include 5, but include 19. That's all interval notations pretty much is telling you. Now, we don't have graphs, we don't have number lines right now to really pull this information out. But let's just, if you have interval notation, brackets and parentheses, can you at least understand what they're telling you or what they're asking you? So we're just going to do the first problem. And what this says here is from 6 to 19. Include both 6 and 19. And why would I say include both? Because both ends of my data sets have the square brackets, which mean to include the end values. And that's all you're doing for page 3 there. So for the second problem, or the second and third problem that's there, you're doing the same thing. Just make sure you understand if it's going to be include or not include based upon a round versus a square bracket. So those are questions, those are pages 2 and 3. I'm going to stop it here, then I'm going to do some of the other pages in subsequent videos.